Hello again and welcome to another project series video, and in this particular video we're going to talk about scene building, particularly how to create a custom scene generation template. And what you can see here is one of a secret project I am involved with, and later on we will be taking a look into the scene generation template management tab and give you a rundown on what you want to take a look into in order to create something similar or honestly completely different from this, based on what your Wonderland needs. So let's dive right into it. All right, so where do we start? The first thing that you want to go into when you first load into the Miliastra editor is to go into the second tab, and it will take you to the entity placement tab right over here. And then at the very bottom of the left side panel, you can see a scene generation template. And the first tab says preset template, and this is where you can see there's two templates included with the Miliastra editor. But if you want to create your very own scene, you want to go onto the uncategorized tab, or you can actually create your very own tab by right clicking on it and selecting a name. So maybe let's say scenes right there, and here, so you can choose whichever tab you want it to be in. The next thing you want to click on is the manage template. Now in here, so click on that and it will take you to an entirely different page. And this is where all of the template that you've created so far will be seen or will be listed. So far you can see that you can see the Wizards and Witchcraft template that I showed you at the very beginning of the video is right over here. And if you want to create your very own template, then you want to go to new scene generation template. So go ahead and click on that, and it will show you this rectangular area that you can actually resize to your own liking. So if you want to create a large area or scenery, then this is what you want to do. Since we have a kind of like a square area right here, let me just adjust this so that it goes almost all the way through everything right here, like that. That seems pretty fine already. All right, so I'll leave it at that. So you can move this around and resize this again to your liking. I'll just leave this right here. All right, okay, so that works for me. You can also rename this by double clicking on that part right there. And let's name this scene 1 just to keep it simple. And then under generation rules, you can just click on random generation for now, since we have not generated a random scattering yet. So just place that under random generation and we're good to go. So the next thing that we want to look into is the asset configuration. Now this is where everything that we actually want to place into our scene will be listed and edited. So go ahead and click that, and as you can see, it comes preloaded with several assets already, and we just want to delete those and start from scratch. I've minimized the right side panel so that we can see things more clearly. And as you can see, by default, there are 5 different spawn layers. And these basically defines what kind of items or what kind of assets will be loaded into when we generate a preview. So the rock layer, by the name itself, generates or defines what kind of rock or rock formations will be populated. The building layer are the building constructs. The tree layer defines the trees or what kind of trees will be loaded into. The vegetation defines the bushes and the flowers, and the decoration layer basically defines all of the other decoration or scatter decorations there will be. And
We can also add a custom layer if we so wish to, but for now, let's focus on the 5 spawn layers by default. Let's start with the rock layer. And the very first option here, after initially effective, is generate based on terrain, and this is exclusive. This is an exclusive option for the rock layer. And to make things more natural, let's leave it so on. But it basically changes how rock layers are spawned based on the terrain or how you set up your terrain to be. All right, so let's go to the next parameter, which is the generation density. Uh, it basically controls how crowded objects are in a layer. So this big square right here is the layer, and generation density. If you set a lower value, let's say 0.1, then these rock formations will be sparser, all right, or they will be more scattered, all right. But if you choose a higher number like 2, then the objects or these assets, the assets right here that you set it to, will be more dense. So, or denser basically. So let's see an example. So let's set this to 0.1. All right. And let's turn off all of the other things for now. And let's place scene so that we can see exactly what it generates to. All right. So let's do a random preview. And as you can see, if you set it to 0.1, the generation density, then it will be very sparse. Now, if you set this to, let's say, 2, and click random preview, and as you can see, it will be very, very dense, and there will be a lot of it generated. Now, if you set this to 0.6, for example, then this will be what it looks like. So, um, the lower the number, the sparser it will be. The higher the number, the denser it will be. All right. So there we have it. Next is the generation randomization. All right, right here, the randomization, and you can set this higher or lower. The minimum is 0 and the maximum is 1. If you set it to 0, um, it doesn't mean that it will be uniform and everything will be the same, but the randomization of everything, the rotation, the zoom, will be less. And if you set it to 1, then it will be more chaotic, which means that um, the zoom and the rotation of every object will be super random. All right, now if you set this to 0, you can see that this is how it looks like. So again, it looks more uniform, right? It's not all the same. There's still rotation jitters and zoom jitters here and there, but it looks more uniform right now. But if you set it to 1, then you can see that it is more chaotic, and the zoom and the rotation is more haphazard, to say the least. All right, so set it to however you see fit. Let's try to set it to 0.6, and it will look like that. All right, as for weight over here, you can see it more clearly if there are more assets in the asset list. But for right now, what you only need to know about weight is that it controls how much or how often the specific asset is selected in the randomization spawning. If you set it to a lower number, then it is less likely to be picked in the random spawning. But if you set it to a higher number, then it will be more likely to be picked in the randomization generation. All right. So we'll take a look more into that once we add more assets into the asset list. But for right now, let's leave it at 1. All right, now if you want to add more assets into that layer, so for example, if you want to add a different kind of rock formation or a different kind of rock in the rock layer, then you would have to go to the edit details. And as you can see here, we have the model assets, and we only have 1 so far. And if you want to add more assets, more rock formation for this rock layer, then you choose add asset. But before any of that, let's take a look first into the asset management on the right side of the screen. And each asset that you add will have its own asset management configuration right here. So uh, really quickly, let's go over each parameters. Again, the weight is similar to what you saw earlier. So you can set it to a lower number, a higher number, depending on how often you want these specific asset to appear. And the model asset here, you can change what asset or which, for example, for this, which kind of rock you want it to show. So for example, if you want this kind of rock, or this kind of rock, or this kind of rock, then you set it right over here. Let's go back and choose the default one first for now. And then the next part is the transformation range. Now, this is where the randomization part of the location, the zoom, and the rotation of the object will be set or configured. Now, you have a minimum and maximum value for offset, which is for the location. The rotational jitter, which is you can set the minimum and the maximum value for the rotations, and the zoom jitter is where you can set the minimum scale or the maximum scale of the object. So, for example, for here, for location, basically, I don't tend to change the X and Z or even Y for that matter because the placements are already random by itself, so it will be placed, at least the X and Z will be placed randomly. But say for example, if you want the object or some of the rocks to be floating in the air for some reason, then you want to set the minimum to 0 or whatever, and then the high to a higher number, like let's say 12 or something like that. All right. Next is the minimum and the maximum rotation. Again, default values 0 to 360. I typically don't need to change, but if you don't want, for example, certain objects to be rotated too much, then you can set this lower. So basically 360 turns back into its original position, right? So 0 to 360, I think that's fine. And the minimum and the maximum zoom, now this is where you can play around. Do you want an object to be really, really tiny, or you want an object to also be really, really big? Then you can set that to 0.5 apparently is the minimum you can set it to, and 1.5 is the maximum you can set something to. All right, so there you have it. All right, so next thing, let's go back to, so rock layer done. The next thing is the building layer, which is generally exactly the same. So if we turn it on and we do a random preview, then you can see like this kind of building right here is generally randomized. So it's generally the same, right? Same as the building or the rock layer, only that there is no generate based on terrain option right here, which again I said it's exclusive for the rock layer. Next, we're going to the tree layer, and as you can see here, I generated a tree layer, and in relation to that, a vegetation layer. Now, these two spawn layers are connected because of the associated range, and if you look into the details, the generate interval distance of the trees. If you look into the details, we have generate interval distance. Now, general interval distance controls the offset distance, or how far away or how near each of the tree layers are to each other, right? So if you set it too low, then the trees will be, right? If you set it low, then the trees will be closer together. But if you set it far, then, so for example, if you set it to 1, then trees would have to be spawned 1 meter away from each other. If you set it for 0.5, then the tree layer should or could be spawned 0.5 away from each other. That's the maximum distance. All right. So that's the interval distance. So If you want it to be closer to each other, you set it to a small number. If you want it to be far apart, then you want to set to a higher number. So let's just keep it for now for 0.5, the default value. And again, same transformation range configuration as you would like. Now, I mentioned vegetation layer because it is associated, or it is connected to this particular configuration or parameter right here, which is exclusive to the vegetation layer, which is called the associated range. Now, this associated range basically tells you that here within 50 meters, right, of a tree layer, the tree being the center, a bush, or the generation density that you set it to, of a bush will be randomly spawned around it. So within 50 meters. Now, if you set if you set your tree interval distance too far apart, that means there is less chance for a tree to spawn because you set it too high, so they have to be far apart. And then your associated range is too small, right? If the associated range is too small, then there is a chance for these bushes to not spawn at all because there is no tree that spawned, and two, the associated range is too small that it can't be spawned. And also, if you set the generation density too high of trees, like for example, if you put it to 2, then there probably won't be enough space to actually spawn vegetation. So that's something that you also want to be careful with. Like you can see here, there's barely any space for the bushes. So it might not spawn if you don't set it properly or optimize it. So let's see. Let's try to lessen the trees. For example, we want to set it to 1.5. Then as you can see, there are more chances for the bushes to actually be spawned because there are space available. All right. So that's it for the tree layer and the vegetation layer for now. And the last part is the decoration layer, which is basically it will be the same as the building layer, and it has no special configuration or parameters. So just the usual generation density and the randomization and all of that. So for example, this tree branch or tree trunk, sorry, about right here, if you generate that together with the trees, then as you can see, there will be some of them that will be spawned over there. All right. So if you're wondering if there is an order in which they are generated, well then yes, there is actually an order. So layers generate in this particular order. So rock first, and then the building layer. Next is the tree layer. Next is the vegetation layer, and so on, the decoration layer. And if the last one would be any custom layers that you add. All right. So be careful with that. Also, another thing that I want to remind you is for vegetation layer, since because of the association rules or the associated range rules, if there is no tree that was spawned, then there will be no generated vegetation layer either. All right, so that's why those two are very connected together. All right, so again, this is why if there is already way too many objects in this scene right here, then as you can see, there might not be that much, vegetation layer spawned because there's already way too many trees. So in order to amend that, you might want to decrease the number of trees right there and random preview. And as you can see, there would be less trees right here, and then there would be more of the vegetation layer. All right. All right, so up next, we are going to try to create a scene right here, like an area based on the different layers and the different assets that we will choose for that specific layer. All right, so now it's time to take everything that we learned so far and apply it so that we can create a scene. for this new area that we added. All right. So for the rock layers, um, we want to create or change this to something. And the good thing about the model asset library is that it already is separated into different categories. So we can just look into the rock and to the rock category right here. And as you can see, there are different um, rock formations available for us to choose. We can try and go for some kind of Natlan-inspired type of um, things right here. So I'll just leave all of the transformation range to the default values, but I would like to change the weight values a little bit. So I want to see this a little bit less, I guess. So 0.9 would be fine. We exit out, and then as you can see, we've changed one of our assets for the rock layer. Now again, if you want to add more, you want to choose add asset, and then you'll see here that we have a blank slate right here. So go ahead and um, we can go ahead and choose another rock platform. So maybe you can stay with the same aesthetic. So we can just choose a mountain stone right here. And then we can change again the density or the weight rather to 0.5, something like that. Again, the weight basically is a way to tell the algorithm that you choose this particular asset more or less, right? Depending on the value that you choose. Let's add one more asset, and I think we could try to add some this kind of mountain stone as well. Or no, we're going for maybe this one, this kind of mountain. Wait, is that the one that added? So maybe this kind of mountain stone, which would be even less maybe. Don't forget to click initially effective so that when you do the random preview, this one is active, right? So we can just do, right, so random preview, and it goes like this. So if this is something that you think works for you, then go ahead. But I feel like I could use a little bit less, like less of this. So I want maybe 0.3. I don't want too many of these particular asset, so I reduce it to 0.3, and let's see what we got. All right, so I think this one is actually a little bit better. Again, density, you can choose to make it a lot denser or less denser. So if you want your rock layers to not occupy a lot of the space, then you can choose to lower the value. So you can choose to do 0.3, and it would be just like this, which is not it's not the kind of look that I'm looking for. So let's try 0.6, and yeah, it is kind of like this. This is kind of like the aesthetic I was going for a little bit. So yeah, so try to optimize it. Again, the numbers also help you, and you can also change the transformation range if you would like. For example, for this asset, you don't want too small of this, so you can just put 1, and then your range would be 1 to 1.5 scale for this particular asset, right? So if you go ahead and do that, then as you can see, there's less variation with the scale. All right. So I actually kind of like the one before, but I do want this particular asset to stay in that 1 to 1.5 range. And yeah, I think this is a little bit better. I want to tone down the randomization too. So let's do 0.5, then it will be more uniform. All right, 0.6. Okay, we're getting there. Now, If you want to add some buildings, right, we can go over here and change the wooden tower into a different building. Here, this is better. We can just go for buildings, like actually built buildings. And since we're going for some Natlanese vibe, we can go for maybe um, stone house. Some of these stone house could be nice. Um, let's see. Let's go for a wooden hut right there. And again, you can change the um, interval distance as well for the building layer. Um, we could also go for an additional type of house called here, stone house. So we can add that as well. And yeah, again, change the weight to the one that you need. I don't need too many houses, so we could probably just go with 0.2 and 0.1 for this one. Again, it's doing this is mostly a hit or miss. So I forgot to turn on the initially effective, so it's not loading. So let's try it again. So you see, there's a lot of houses being built around. Again, this is randomly spawned. Um, we can tune down the randomization a bit more. We could do 0.2 to make it more uniform. So yeah, all right. So and then for the generation density, I could go for maybe 0.2 since I don't need that many houses. All right. So yeah, there's only like one of that. Maybe that's way too much. So maybe 0.1 or 0.3 rather. So yeah, you can see more houses being built right there. Next would be tree layer. So what we want to do is try to enable tree layer as well. Um, you want to change these trees to something more Natlanese. Are there any Natlanese tree right here? Probably not. So let's just go for um, something that matches the colors a little bit. So maybe this one right here is more Natlanese. And let's do another one of this and change this to that other tree that looks a little bit more Natlanese right here. Yeah, so let's try it with the default values and then adjust it as we see fit. Alright, so that is too much, right? So we want to tune that down. Let's make it maybe 0.5. We don't want that many trees. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better. Maybe we could even go for 0.6, but we'll see. And as for vegetation, we could go for a little bit more density, maybe 150. And then let's change this to something also a bit more Natlanese, if there is any. So what's something that is feeling a bit like Natlan vibes? I wonder. Maybe this shrub right here. Yeah, that shrub looks like more like a Natlanese shrub. So we can go for that as well. Yeah, that looks a lot like the shrubs right here. Let's do a random preview and see how it looks like. Yeah, yeah, it does spawn around it. Pretty nice, pretty nice. We could decrease the interval distance as well of the shrub to, let's say, 0.2. Let's do a random preview. And let's see. Okay. There's barely any. And I feel like it might be because there are way too many rock layers. So we want to decrease this again. 0.3 maybe. So 0.2 and 0.2 as well for this. And let's random preview this. Yeah, okay, so that's a little bit better. Also, actually, I've been changing the weight, but you could also change the generation density as well. So you can just go for, I do want it to be picked a bit more, so 0.5. But let's do a 0.5 generation density for now. And as you can see, yeah, it's looking a lot better with the optimized generation density. Next, you want to tune our decoration layer. So let's turn that on. And yeah, let's add some assets. So artificial decoration. Let's try to find some Natlan-inspired vibes right here. Yeah, right here, stone porch. We could add that. We could also add more assets over here. Let's do add asset, and let's do artificial decoration. Notice boards right here. We have a torch. So yeah, that's pretty good. You want to add that. Let's try to add some notice boards right here. And let's change the weight to maybe 0.5 because we don't want it to be selected too often. We want to keep it at 0.8 maybe even 0.3 because we don't want that many signboards. But let's see what we have right now with this kind of generation density. And there you have it. And let's do a random preview one more time. And just keep clicking on it until you end up with something that you want to work with. So far, it hasn't really generated the thing that I want the most. So I might change the building layer and make it a little bit less. All right, let's do that. All right, so let's do it again. Random. All right. I think this one looks nice enough. You can go ahead. If you really like this, you can also lock the generation result so that when you hit confirm, then it will not randomize again. So you can go ahead and enable that. We can also change or save the distribution rules. You can save that so that all of the asset configurations that you've made, it will be saved and you don't have to start from scratch when you do the same scene in a different place. All right, so you can click on that. And once you're happy with the generation results, don't forget to lock the generated result right here, enable it so that even if you change any of these parameters right here, then the generation would still stay the same. All right, so if you want to fine tune basically the generated scene, if you think there are things that seems out of place, like for example, this building right here seemed out of place, or if you want to move around some of the bushes, you can do so by zooming into the area, and as soon as the white tinge is gone, then you're free to choose any objects in the scene and you're free to move them around. So you can move the location in any axis, rotate them as you so wish, like so, for example, like there. Another example, I think I want to move this I want to move this building right here and make it so that it faces this way instead. Then you could do so. You can move this too, and then you can move this notice board if you so wish to, like that. And move this around. So you can fine tune it the way you want to, of course, and make sure that, for example, some of these bushes, you probably don't want the native collision turned on for those. So you have to manually remove the native collision for those kinds of things that you think don't need it. So go ahead and fine tune that as you wish. I'll move around some of the pieces as well so that we'll have a, you know, a much more natural surroundings um, over here. So again, I'll move around some of the pieces right over there. And yeah, you can also delete some of the stuff that you don't need. Um, and once you're happy, then you can exit out of this, and there we go. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something out of it, and I can't wait to see what kind of scenes you can make out of this. And yeah, see you in Miliastra Wonderland.